The text message wasn't meant for me. That's what made it perfect. I was sitting in my truck outside the Parish Heights Municipal Building, waiting for Jovie to finish what she called her budget meeting with the mayor's office. 3 hours into what should have been a 90-minute session, her phone buzzed on the dashboard where she'd left it charging. "Can't wait to see you tonight, same room as last week." D. My name isn't D. My name is Brooks Carven, and I've been married to Jovie for 14 years. I own Carven Electric, the company my father started in 1987, and I know exactly what happens when circuits get overloaded. They spark, they smoke, and then everything goes dark. I stared at that message for maybe 30 seconds before the pieces started falling into place. The late meetings that had become routine over the past 6 months. The new clothes she claimed were networking investments. The way she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner and taking calls in the other room. Jovie emerged from the building at 9:15, looking flustered and checking her watch. She slid into the passenger seat and immediately reached for her phone. "How'd the meeting go?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Complicated. Budget shortfalls. You know how it is." She glanced at her screen and her face went pale for just a second before she recovered. "Sorry it ran so late." "No problem. I had some estimates to review anyway." The drive home was quiet. Jovie spent most of it typing responses to messages I couldn't see, her thumbs moving quickly across the screen. Every few minutes she'd glance at me like she was measuring something. Our house sits on 2 acres just outside the city limits, a colonial I'd rewired myself when we bought it 10 years ago. Jovie went straight upstairs to shower while I made coffee and tried to process what I'd seen. The smart thing would have been to confront her immediately, but I've learned that the smart thing and the right thing aren't always the same. Instead, I did what any electrician would do when faced with a problem. I started tracing the circuit. Jovie's laptop was open on the kitchen counter, logged into her email. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed of it either. When someone's been lying to you for months, privacy becomes a luxury you can't afford. The first thing I found was a hotel confirmation from the Marriott downtown. Room 412, booked for the previous Thursday night, the same Thursday when Jovie had supposedly been at her book club until midnight. The second thing was a credit card statement showing charges I didn't recognize, expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together, purchases from boutiques that specialized in what their website called intimate apparel. The third thing was a calendar entry that made my stomach drop. D, 7:30 p.m., usual place. Tonight's date. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, listening to the water running upstairs. 14 years of marriage, and it had come down to this. Hotel receipts and secret calendar entries and messages from someone whose name I didn't even know. My phone rang. Connie's name appeared on the screen, and I answered without thinking. "Brooks? You sound weird. What's wrong?" Connie is my sister, 3 years older and infinitely more practical than I am. She runs the financial side of Carven Electric and has never particularly liked my wife. I'd always assumed it was simple sibling rivalry, but now I wondered if she'd seen something I'd missed. "Jovie's having an affair," I said. The silence stretched for maybe 10 seconds before Connie responded. "How long have you known?" "About 20 minutes. How long have you suspected?" 6 months, maybe longer. The way she talks about her job, the new clothes, the attitude. Plus, our accounts receivable has been weird lately. Small amounts going missing, always with explanations that don't quite add up. That hit me like a punch to the chest. She's been stealing from the company? I can't prove it yet, but yeah, I think so. The shower stopped upstairs. I could hear Jovie moving around the bedroom, probably getting ready for her date with D. "I need to think about this," I told Connie. "No, you need to act on it. Don't give her time to cover her tracks or spin some story that makes you feel guilty. Document everything, change the passwords, and get yourself a lawyer." I'm serious, Brooks. You're a good man, but you're too trusting. This woman has been playing you, and if you don't move fast, she's going to take you for everything you're worth." Jovie appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a black dress I'd never seen before. She looked beautiful, which somehow made everything worse. "I have to go," I told Connie. "Call me tomorrow. We'll figure this out." I hung up as Jovie reached the bottom of the stairs. She was carrying a small purse and checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Going somewhere?" I asked. "Emergency at work. One of the department heads is having issues with the new software rollout. Might be late again." She kissed my cheek, the same casual goodbye she'd given me hundreds of times before. But now it felt like a performance, carefully rehearsed and completely hollow. "Drive safe," I said. She left through the garage, and I listened to her car disappear down the driveway. Then I went back to her laptop and started printing everything I could find. Hotel confirmations, credit card statements, email exchanges with someone named Derron Wilder, whose messages were carefully worded but clearly intimate. Calendar entries that corresponded with nights she'd claimed to be working late or attending various social functions. By midnight, I had a stack of papers 3 inches thick and a plan that was starting to form in my mind. Jovie had been careful, but not careful enough. She'd left a trail that any decent investigator could follow, and I was nothing if not thorough. The front door opened at 12:45. Jovie came in quietly, probably assuming I'd gone to bed. I was sitting at the kitchen table with all the evidence spread out in front of me. "Brooks, what are you doing up?" "Waiting for you." I gestured to the papers. "We need to talk." She looked at the documents and her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, fear, and finally anger. "You went through my personal things?" "Your personal things were funding your affair with my company's money." "I don't know what you think you found, but—" "Derron Wilder, real estate developer, divorced 2 years ago, drives a Tesla, and apparently likes booking hotel rooms on Thursday nights." Jovie's composure cracked. "You have no right to spy on me. I have every right to know where my money is going, and I have every right to know why my wife has been lying to me for the past 6 months. She tried to rally, switching tactics the way she always did when confronted with something she couldn't deny. "You want to know why? Because you've been neglecting me for years. All you care about is that stupid company and your tools and your projects. When was the last time you took me somewhere nice? When was the last time you made me feel special? When was the last time you weren't planning to meet another man?" That stopped her cold. She stood there in her black dress, holding her purse like a shield, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret in her eyes. "Brooks, I've already filed for divorce," I said. "Connie helped me find a lawyer. The papers will be served tomorrow." The regret vanished, replaced by fury. "You can't do this. Half of everything is mine, including the company. I'll take you for everything you have." "Good luck with that, especially when your new boyfriend finds out his wife knows about the affair." Jovie went very still. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the last piece of paper from my stack, a printout from the county clerk's website. Derron Wilder, married to Helena Trenwall-Wilder in 2019. Interesting that he forgot to mention that detail, don't you think? The color drained from her face. "You're lying." "Public records don't lie, Jovie. People do." She turned and walked toward the stairs, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. At the bottom step, she paused and looked back at me. "This isn't over." "Yes," I said, "it is." She went upstairs, and I heard the bedroom door slam. I gathered up all the papers and put them in a folder, then went down to my workshop in the basement. I had calls to make and plans to finalize, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could see clearly. The circuit was broken. Now it was time to rewire everything from scratch. The next morning, Jovie was gone before I woke up. She'd taken 2 suitcases and left a note saying she was staying with her friend Gina until this mess got sorted out. The note was propped against the coffee maker, written on company letterhead from her job at the Municipal Human Resources Department. Even her goodbye was theft. I called Connie while I was getting dressed for work. "How'd she take it?" my sister asked. About as well as you'd expect. She's moved out temporarily and she's threatening to take half the company. Let her try. I've been digging into those missing funds, and it's worse than I thought. She's been skimming from the petty cash account for 8 months, always small amounts, always with fake receipts. We're talking about maybe 15,000 total. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the same bed where Jovie had been planning her affair while lying next to me every night. 15,000? Con, that's embezzlement. That's criminal charges. I know. The question is whether you want to pursue it or use it as leverage in the divorce. I thought about that while I tied my work boots. Jovie had been stealing from my family's company to fund her relationship with another man. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it took my breath away. Let's see how reasonable she wants to be first, I said finally. The Carven Electric office sits in a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town, surrounded by plumbing supply companies and auto repair shops. I've been coming here since I was 12 years old, first to help my father with paperwork and later to learn the trade that would become my life. Wally Wilcox was waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning against his truck with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. Wally's been my foreman for 7 years, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who can diagnose electrical problems by sound alone. Heard you had some trouble at home, he said. Word travels fast. Connie called me this morning, said you might need some backup today. I unlocked the office door and we went inside together. The smell of coffee and electrical components welcomed me like an old friend, a sharp contrast to the perfumed hostility I'd been living with at home. What kind of backup are we talking about? I asked. Wally grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen in weeks. The kind where we make sure your soon-to-be ex-wife doesn't have access to anything she shouldn't. Passwords, accounts, keys, codes, everything. We spent the morning changing every security protocol in the building. Computer passwords, alarm codes, the combination to the safe where we kept the petty cash. Connie arrived around 10 with a box of new locks for the filing cabinets and a grim expression. I found more, she said, setting the box on my desk. She's been using the company credit card for personal expenses. Restaurants, clothing stores, even a jewelry purchase last month for $800. Jewelry? A men's watch. Want to bet it wasn't for you? The anger that had been simmering since last night started to boil over. Jovie hadn't just betrayed our marriage. She'd stolen from the company my father built, the business that employed 12 people and supported their families. How much total? I asked. Close to 25,000, spread over the past year. She was smart about it, keeping individual transactions small and spacing them out. If I hadn't been looking specifically for irregularities, I might have missed it. Wally whistled low. That's felony territory. I know. Connie sat down across from my desk. Brooks, you need to decide how you want to handle this. We can file charges, or we can use it as leverage in the divorce, but we can't do both. My phone rang before I could answer. Jovie's name appeared on the screen, and I almost didn't pick up. But curiosity got the better of me. What do you want? We need to talk. Can you meet me for lunch? I don't think we have anything to discuss. Please, 1 hour, the diner on Maple Street. I think we can work this out without lawyers. I looked at Connie, who was shaking her head vigorously. Fine, noon, but I'm bringing documentation. Thank you, and Brooks, I'm sorry, for all of it. She hung up, and I stared at the phone for a moment. Jovie had always been good at sounding sincere when she needed something. You're not seriously considering reconciliation, Connie said. No, but I want to hear what she has to say. Maybe she'll give us something we can use. The Maple Street Diner is the sort of place where officers eat breakfast and construction crews grab lunch. The booths are worn vinyl, and the coffee is strong enough to jolt anyone awake. I got there 5 minutes early and picked a table near the back where we could talk without being overheard. Jovie showed up exactly on time, looking tired and younger than her 36 years. She'd traded the black dress for jeans and a sweater, and she wasn't wearing the makeup she usually considered essential for public appearances. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "You have 1 hour." She ordered coffee and a salad she didn't touch. I stuck with coffee and waited for her to start talking. "I know you're angry," she began, "and you have every right to be, but this doesn't have to destroy everything we've built together." "Everything we've built?" "Jovie, you've been stealing from my company to pay for your affair. What exactly do you think we've built?" "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Derron and I, we just connected. He understands my ambitions in ways that you never have." "Your ambitions to commit embezzlement?" She flinched. "I was going to pay it back. All of it. Derron has some investment opportunities that would have made the money irrelevant." "Investment opportunities? Is that what we're calling adultery now?" The waitress refilled our coffee cups, giving us a moment of silence to regroup. Jovie used the time to compose herself, sitting straighter and meeting my eyes with something that might have been determination. "I want to propose a deal," she said. "I'm listening. I'll agree to a no-contest divorce. No claims on the company, minimal alimony, clean break. In exchange, you don't pursue the missing money as a criminal matter." I'd been expecting something like this, but hearing it out loud still surprised me. Jovie was essentially admitting to theft while trying to negotiate her way out of the consequences. "And what about Derron? What about him? Does he know you're married? Does he know his wife exists?" Something flickered across her face, too quick for me to identify. "Our relationship is complicated." "I'll bet it is, especially since Helena Trenwall-Wilder filed for divorce yesterday morning." Jovie went very still. "What?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the court filing I'd found online an hour earlier. "Irreconcilable differences, citing adultery. Seems like your boyfriend's wife is a step ahead of both of us." The color drained from Jovie's face. "That's impossible. Derron said they were separated." "Derron said a lot of things, apparently. The question is whether you believe them or whether you just wanted to believe them." She stared at the phone screen like it might change if she looked hard enough. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "He promised me we'd be together. He said he just needed time to handle the logistics." "The logistics of lying to 2 women at once?" Jovie's composure finally cracked. Tears started running down her cheeks, and she fumbled in her purse for tissues. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" For a moment, I felt something that might have been sympathy. But then I remembered the hotel receipts and the stolen money and the months of lies, and the feeling passed. "Yeah," I said. "You have." I left $20 on the table and walked out of the diner. Jovie didn't try to stop me. That afternoon, I did something I'd been putting off for weeks. I called Helena Trenwall-Wilder. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Helena Wilder speaking." "Mrs. Wilder, my name is Brooks Carven. I think we have something in common." A pause. "Mr. Carven, I was wondering when you'd call. You know who I am?" "I know my husband has been having an affair with your wife for the past 6 months. I know they've been using the Marriott downtown for their meetings. And I know your wife has been funding their relationship with money stolen from your business." I sat down hard in my office chair. "How long have you known?" "Since the beginning. I hired a private investigator the first time Derron came home smelling like unfamiliar perfume. I've been documenting everything, waiting for the right moment to act." "And yesterday was the right moment?" "Yesterday was when I decided I'd gathered enough evidence to ensure I get everything I want in the divorce, including the penthouse apartment where they think they're going to live together." There was something in her voice that made me smile for the first time in days. Helena Trenwall-Wilder wasn't just angry, she was strategic. "Mrs. Wilder, would you be interested in meeting for dinner? I have a proposition that might interest both of us." I thought you'd never ask. Helena suggested we meet at Meridian, the most expensive restaurant in Parish Heights. It was the kind of place where Jovie had always wanted me to take her for special occasions, all white tablecloths and wine lists that cost more than most people's car payments. I arrived 15 minutes early and asked for a table with a view of the entrance. Helena walked in exactly on time, and I understood immediately why Derron had been willing to risk everything for my wife. Helena was stunning, but in a way that suggested intelligence and control rather than simple beauty. She was also, I realized as she approached my table, absolutely furious. "Mr. Carven," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Brooks, please, and thank you for agreeing to meet." "Helena, and I should thank you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for weeks." The waiter appeared with menus and wine recommendations. Helena ordered a bottle of something French and expensive, then settled back in her chair with the air of someone preparing for battle. "So," she said, "what exactly did you have in mind?" "Revenge," I said simply. She smiled, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying expression I'd ever seen. "I was hoping you'd say that." Over the next 2 hours, we laid out a plan that was elegant in its simplicity. Jovie and Derron thought they were playing a game where only the two of them knew the rules. We were going to change the rules and make sure everyone was watching when we did it. "The key," Helena explained, "is timing. They're planning to make their relationship public after both divorces are finalized. Derron thinks he's going to get half my assets and use them to start fresh with your wife." "How much are we talking about?" "Derron likes to think he's wealthy, but most of his assets are tied up in developments that haven't turned a profit yet. The real money is mine. Family trust, established before we met. He gets nothing." I was beginning to understand why Helena had waited so long to file for divorce. She hadn't just been gathering evidence, she'd been setting traps. "What about the apartment where they meet?" "Penthouse at the Meridian Tower. Derron's name is on the lease, but I've been paying for it. As of yesterday, the lease is in my name and the locks have been changed." "So they're homeless?" "Effectively, yes, but that's just the beginning." Helena pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of photographs. Jovie and Derron entering the hotel. Jovie and Derron at restaurants I couldn't afford. Jovie and Derron shopping for furniture that I now realized was meant for their love nest. "Your wife has expensive tastes," Helena observed. "She's about to find out how expensive." We finished dinner and walked out to the parking lot together. The night was cool and clear, and I felt more optimistic than I had in months. "There's one more thing," Helena said as we reached her car. "I want to be there when you confront them." "Both of them?" "I think they deserve to face the consequences together, don't you?" I thought about that. Jovie and Derron had been making decisions together, lying together, stealing together. It seemed appropriate that they should face the reckoning together as well. "What did you have in mind?" Helena's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Dinner, tomorrow night, same restaurant. I'll invite Derron, you invite Jovie. We'll let them think they're meeting us separately to negotiate. And then? And then we introduce them to each other." The next day passed in a blur of phone calls and preparation. Jovie agreed to meet me for dinner, claiming she had new information that might change my perspective on our situation. I didn't ask what kind of information. I was pretty sure I already knew. Connie spent the morning documenting the last of Jovie's financial irregularities, while Wally and the crew made sure every trace of her access to company resources had been eliminated. By 5 o'clock, Jovie Carven was effectively a stranger to Carven Electric. I arrived at Meridian early and took the same table Helena and I had shared the night before. The hostess, a young woman who recognized me from my previous visit, seemed confused by the reservation details. "Mr. Carven, I have you down for a party of 4 tonight?" "That's correct. 2 separate parties, same table. It's going to be an interesting evening." Helena arrived first, looking elegant in a navy dress that probably cost more than I made in a week. She took the seat across from me and ordered wine with the confidence of someone who owned stock in the vineyard. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "I've been ready for months." I just didn't know it. Derron appeared in the entrance at 7:30, scanning the dining room until he spotted Helena. He was tall and handsome in the way that suggested personal trainers and expensive grooming, wearing a suit that fit too perfectly to be off the rack. He approached our table with the easy confidence of a man who thought he was in control of the situation. "Helena, darling," he said, bending to kiss her cheek. "I'm so glad you called. I think we can work through this misunderstanding." "Derron," Helena said smoothly, "I'd like you to meet Brooks Carven." Derron's smile faltered as he looked at me for the first time. I could see him trying to place the name, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to something approaching panic. "Brooks Carven," I said, standing and extending my hand. "Jovie's husband." Derron's face went pale, but before he could respond, Jovie appeared at the entrance. She spotted our table immediately and started walking over, her expression shifting from anticipation to confusion as she realized there were 4 place settings. "Brooks?" she said as she approached. "What's going on?" "Jovie," I said pleasantly, "I'd like you to meet Helena Trenwall-Wilder, Derron's wife." The silence that followed was absolute. Jovie looked from Helena to Derron to me, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound. Derron remained frozen in place, his hand still extended from our interrupted handshake. Helena broke the silence by standing and extending her own hand to Jovie. "Mrs. Carven, I've heard so much about you." Jovie stared at the offered hand like it might bite her. "I don't understand." "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the empty chairs. "We have a lot to discuss." What followed was the most surreal dinner conversation of my life. Helena and I had agreed beforehand to let Jovie and Derron do most of the talking, and they didn't disappoint. Within 10 minutes, they were contradicting each other's lies and revealing details that neither Helena nor I had known. "You told me you were separated," Jovie said to Derron, her voice rising. "We are separated," Derron replied, shooting a venomous look at Helena. "She's just being vindictive about the paperwork." "The paperwork," Helena said calmly. "That shows we've been living together and sharing assets right up until I filed for divorce yesterday." "You told me Helena was unstable," Jovie continued. "You said she was making up stories about our relationship." "I never said she was unstable." "Yes, you did. Last week when I asked why we couldn't just tell everyone about us. You said she was delusional and that I shouldn't worry about her." I watched this exchange with fascination. Jovie and Derron were destroying each other more effectively than Helena and I ever could have managed alone. "Perhaps," I said during a brief pause in their argument, "we should discuss the practical matters." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. From it, I extracted copies of the hotel receipts, credit card statements, and bank records that Connie had compiled. "Jovie, these are copies of the company financial records showing approximately $25,000 in unauthorized expenses over the past year. Restaurants, hotels, clothing, jewelry, all charged to Carven Electric and all related to your affair." Jovie's face went white. "Brooks, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, but the explanation doesn't change the fact that you committed embezzlement to fund your relationship with a married man." I turned to Derron. "And you, apparently, have been lying to my wife about your marital status while using her stolen money to maintain a lifestyle you couldn't afford on your own." Derron found his voice for the first time since sitting down. "Now wait just a minute." "No," Helena interrupted, her voice cutting through his protest like a blade. "You wait. You've been lying to both of us for months, and now you're going to sit there and listen to the consequences." She reached into her own purse and produced a thick folder. "Derron, these are the divorce papers. As you'll see, I'm claiming adultery as grounds, which means you forfeit any claim to marital assets. The penthouse apartment you've been using for your meetings? Mine. The car you've been driving? Mine. The investment account you thought you were going to use to start your new life? Also mine." Derron's composure finally cracked. "You can't do this. I have rights. You have the right to find yourself a good lawyer, Helena said, because you're going to need one. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I pulled out my own set of papers. Jovie, these are our divorce papers. As Helena mentioned, I'm also claiming adultery. Given the financial irregularities we've discovered, I think you'll find the settlement terms quite reasonable. You get to walk away without criminal charges, and I get to keep the company my father built. Jovie stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. The waiter approached our table cautiously, probably sensing the tension that was radiating from our little group. Is everything all right here? Perfect, I said, standing up. In fact, I think we're finished. I left a $100 bill on the table and looked down at Jovie and Derron, who were still sitting in stunned silence. You two deserve each other, I said. Unfortunately, neither of you can afford each other anymore. Helena and I walked out of the restaurant together, leaving our respective spouses to figure out how they were going to pay for dinner. In the parking lot, Helena turned to me with that dangerous smile. That went better than I expected. It's not over yet, I said. They'll regroup and try to find a way to salvage this. Let them try. I've been planning this for months, and I haven't shown them my best cards yet. As I drove home to my empty house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of a job well done. Jovie and Derron had thought they were playing a game where they held all the advantages. They were about to learn how wrong they'd been. The next morning brought the first real surprise of what was turning into the most complicated week of my life. I was having coffee and reviewing work schedules when my doorbell rang at 7:30. Through the window, I could see a Parish Heights police cruiser in my driveway. Detective Stan Rourke stood on my porch, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Stan and I had known each other since high school, and he'd been buying electrical work from Carven Electric for the past 5 years. Morning, Brooks. Mind if I come in? Of course. Coffee? Thanks. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd confronted Jovie with evidence of her affair 3 days earlier. Stan looked tired, and I suspected this wasn't a social call. I got a complaint yesterday, he said finally. Harassment, intimidation, that sort of thing. From who? Derron Wilder. Says you and some woman ambushed him at a restaurant, made threats about his business and personal life. I almost laughed. Stan, I had dinner with my wife, her lover, and his wife. Nobody made any threats. We just shared some information that Mr. Wilder found inconvenient. That's what I figured. But I have to follow up on complaints. You know how it is. What exactly is he claiming happened? Stan pulled out a small notebook. Says you and Helena Wilder conspired to entrap him in a public place, that you made threats about his financial situation, and that you implied there would be consequences if he didn't end his relationship with your wife. The only consequences I mentioned were the ones that were already happening. His wife filed for divorce, my wife and I are getting divorced, and there are some financial irregularities that might become legal issues. Financial irregularities? I got up and retrieved the folder of documents Connie had prepared. My wife has been embezzling from our company to fund her affair with Derron. We're talking about $25,000 over the past year. Stan whistled low as he flipped through the papers. This is pretty damning stuff. It gets better. Derron apparently told my wife he was separated from his wife and planning to divorce. Meanwhile, he was telling his wife that Jovie was just a business associate. So he was lying to both of them. Extensively. And now that the truth is out, he's trying to make it sound like Helena and I are the villains. Stan closed the folder and handed it back to me. Brooks, I've known you for 20 years, and you're not the type to harass anyone. But I have to ask, Are you planning any kind of retaliation against Wilder? I thought about that question. Was I planning retaliation? Or was I simply planning to make sure the truth stayed visible? I'm planning to protect my interests and make sure my wife faces the consequences of her choices. If that makes Derron uncomfortable, that's not my problem. Fair enough. Just keep it legal, all right? Wilder's got money and connections, and he's not above making trouble for people who cross him. After Stan left, I called Helena to let her know about Derron's complaint. He's panicking, she said, which means our little dinner party had the desired effect. What's your next move? I'm meeting with my lawyer this morning to finalize the divorce paperwork. After that, I thought I might pay a visit to Derron's business partners. They might be interested to know about his recent personal complications. Helena, be careful. He's already filed one harassment complaint. Let him file another one. I have documentation for everything I'm going to say. That afternoon, I was working on a rewiring job at a commercial building downtown when Wally called with news that made my day considerably more interesting. Boss, you need to get back to the office. Jovie's here, and she's not alone. Who's with her? Some lawyer type in an expensive suit. They're demanding access to the financial records and claiming she has ownership rights in the company. I was back at the office in 15 minutes. Jovie was sitting in the reception area with a man I didn't recognize, both of them looking like they were preparing for war. Brooks, Jovie said as I walked in. This is my attorney, Richard Kellerman. We need to discuss the company assets. Kellerman stood up and extended his hand. He was younger than I'd expected, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of aggressive confidence that suggested he'd never lost a case he thought he could win. Mr. Carven, I represent Mrs. Carven in the dissolution of your marriage. We have some concerns about the way company assets are being handled. What kind of concerns? My client has been involved in the day-to-day operations of Carven Electric for several years. She has legitimate claims to partnership status and the assets that come with it. I looked at Jovie, who was trying to project an air of wounded dignity. Involved how, exactly? I've been handling the administrative side of the business, she said. Scheduling, customer relations, financial oversight. Financial oversight, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Kellerman frowned. Mr. Carven, if you're implying some kind of financial impropriety, I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it directly. I turned to Connie, who had been watching this exchange from behind her desk. Con, would you mind showing Mr. Kellerman the documentation we discussed? Connie produced a thick folder that I recognized as an expanded version of the evidence she'd been gathering. Kellerman took it and began reading, his confident expression gradually shifting to concern. These appear to be allegations of embezzlement, he said finally. They're not allegations, I said. They're bank records, credit card statements, and receipts. Your client has been stealing from this company for over a year. Jovie's composure finally cracked. I wasn't stealing. I was borrowing against my future partnership share. Future partnership share, I repeated. Jovie, you've never been a partner in this company. You've never had any ownership stake. You've been an employee, and not a particularly honest one. Kellerman was still reading through the documents, and I could see him reassessing his client's position with every page. Mrs. Carven, he said carefully, you didn't mention these financial transactions when we discussed your case. Because they're not relevant. Brooks is trying to make me look like a criminal to avoid paying me what I'm owed. What you're owed, I said, is a criminal defense attorney. Kellerman closed the folder and handed it back to Connie. Mr. Carven, my client and I need to discuss these developments. We'll be in touch. They left without another word, and I watched through the window as Kellerman began what looked like a very animated conversation with Jovie in the parking lot. Think she'll find a new lawyer? Connie asked. I think she'll find out that most lawyers don't like taking cases they can't win. That evening, Helena called with an update on her own legal maneuvering. Derron's partners are very concerned about the negative publicity, she reported. Apparently, family values are important to their investor base. Are they dropping him? They're considering it, especially after I mentioned that he might be facing charges related to receiving stolen property. Receiving stolen property? The jewelry your wife bought him with company funds. Technically, it was purchased with stolen money, which makes him complicit in the theft. I had to admire Helena's thoroughness. She wasn't just destroying Derron's marriage, she was systematically dismantling his entire life. How's he taking it? Not well. He showed up at my office this afternoon, demanding that I drop the divorce and threatening to sue me for defamation. What did you tell him? I told him that truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims, and that I had enough truth to keep him busy for years. We talked for another few minutes about logistics and next steps. Helena was planning to accelerate the divorce proceedings, while I was going to meet with the district attorney about the embezzlement charges. Helena, I said before we hung up, are you sure you want to push this as far as we're talking about? Once we involve criminal charges, there's no going back. Brooks, they made their choices. They lied, they stole, they betrayed the people who trusted them. I'm not interested in mercy. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about how much my life had changed in less than a week. 7 days ago, I'd been a married man who trusted his wife and believed in the basic fairness of the world. Now I was planning the systematic destruction of 2 people who had betrayed that trust. The strange thing was, I didn't feel guilty about it. Jovie and Derron had created this situation through their own choices. I was simply making sure they faced the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. There are things you don't know. D. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Whatever Derron wanted to tell me, I was pretty sure I didn't want to hear it. But I was also pretty sure he was going to keep trying. Derron didn't wait for me to respond to his text. The next morning, he was waiting in the Carven Electric parking lot when I arrived for work, leaning against his Tesla like he owned the place. We need to talk, he said as I got out of my truck. No, we don't. I started walking toward the office, but he followed me. Brooks, there are things about this situation that you don't understand. Things about your wife that might change your perspective. I stopped and turned around. What things? Not here. Too public. Meet me for coffee in an hour, the place on Elm Street. Against my better judgment, I agreed. There was something in Derron's voice that suggested desperation, and I was curious enough to hear what he thought he could tell me that would make a difference. The coffee shop on Elm Street was nearly empty at 9 in the morning, just a few college students with laptops and a businessman reading the paper. Derron was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth and looking like he hadn't slept in days. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down. You have 10 minutes. Jovie approached me, he said without preamble. Not the other way around. I waited for him to continue. 6 months ago, she showed up at one of my development sites. Said she was there on behalf of the city, something about electrical permits. But after we finished the official business, she asked if I wanted to get a drink. And you said yes. I said yes. I was having problems with Helena, and Jovie was attractive and seemed interested. It was stupid, but I'm not going to pretend I was thinking clearly. Get to the point, Derron. The point is that Jovie had a plan from the beginning. She knew about my marriage problems, she knew about my financial situation, and she knew exactly how to position herself to take advantage of both. I studied his face, looking for signs that he was lying. What are you saying? I'm saying your wife is a predator. She targeted me specifically because she thought I could provide her with a way out of her marriage and into a better financial situation. That's ridiculous. Jovie doesn't have the sophistication to plan something like that. Doesn't she? Think about it, Brooks. How long has she been skimming money from your company? How long has she been setting up the financial infrastructure for her exit strategy? I didn't want to admit it, but Derron had a point. The embezzlement had been going on for over a year, long before the affair started, which meant Jovie had been planning her departure from our marriage well before she'd found her replacement. Even if that's true, I said, it doesn't change what you did. No, it doesn't. But it might change how you think about what happens next. What do you mean? Derron leaned forward across the table. Jovie is planning to disappear, Brooks. She's been moving money into accounts you don't know about, setting up credit cards under her maiden name, creating a whole new financial identity. How do you know this? Because she told me. She thought we were going to disappear together, start fresh somewhere else with the money she'd been stealing from you and the settlement she expected to get from the divorce. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Where? Florida. She's got a condo rented in Miami under her maiden name, paid for with money she transferred out of your joint accounts over the past 6 months. I thought about our joint accounts, the ones I'd been too trusting to monitor closely. Jovie had always handled the household finances, and I'd never questioned her judgment. How much money are we talking about? Maybe $50,000 total, not enough to live on forever, but enough to disappear for a while. And you were going to go with her? Derron laughed bitterly. I thought I was, right up until Helena froze all my assets, and I realized I didn't have anything left to contribute to Jovie's escape plan. So now you're here, warning me about her plans. Why? Because she's going to try to take you for everything she can get before she disappears, and because I don't want to be the only one who gets destroyed by this situation. I finished my coffee and stood up. Derron, I appreciate the information, but don't mistake this conversation for forgiveness or alliance. You're still the man who helped my wife steal from my company. I know. But Brooks? What? Be careful. Jovie isn't the woman you married. Maybe she never was. I left the coffee shop with more questions than answers, and a growing suspicion that the situation was more complicated than I'd realized. If Derron was telling the truth, Jovie wasn't just an unfaithful wife who'd made some bad decisions. She was a calculating predator who'd been planning her exit strategy for over a year. Back at the office, I found Connie waiting with a stack of bank statements and a grim expression. We have a problem, she said. How big a problem? Your joint checking account has been emptied. $47,000 transferred out yesterday in 3 separate transactions. I sat down hard in my chair. To where? An account at a different bank, under Jovie's maiden name. I called them, but they won't give me any information without a court order. Derron wasn't lying. What? I told Connie about my conversation with Derron, watching her expression grow darker with every detail. That manipulative witch, she said finally. She's been planning this for months. The question is, what do we do about it? We call the police. This isn't just embezzlement anymore, it's theft on a much larger scale. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Helena's name appeared on the screen. Helena, I was just about to call you. Brooks, we have a situation. Derron cleaned out our joint accounts this morning. $200,000 gone. When? The transfers went through at 8 this morning, about an hour before he met with you. I felt the pieces clicking into place. He was buying time. The whole conversation about Jovie's plans, it was a distraction while he made his own escape. What conversation? I explained Derron's claims about Jovie's predatory behavior and her plans to disappear to Florida. Some of that might be true, Helena said, but I think Derron was projecting his own plans onto your wife. He's the one who's been planning an escape route. So they're both running. It looks that way. The question is whether they're running together or separately. I thought about that. Separately. If they were still working together, Derron wouldn't have warned me about Jovie's plans. Unless he was lying about that too. No, I think they've turned on each other. Honor among thieves only goes so far. Helena was quiet for a moment. Brooks, I think we need to accelerate our timeline. If they're both planning to disappear, we need to move fast. What do you have in mind? Meet me at my lawyer's office in an hour. It's time to involve law enforcement before our respective spouses make it to whatever jurisdiction they think will protect them. The next few hours were a blur of police stations, lawyers, and paperwork. Helena and I filed formal complaints for theft, embezzlement, and fraud, providing documentation that painted a clear picture of systematic financial abuse. Detective Rourke took our statements personally, his expression growing more serious as the scope of the theft became clear. "This is organized crime territory," he said finally. "We're talking about conspiracy, money laundering, interstate flight to avoid prosecution. The FBI might want to get involved." "How long before you can issue warrants?" Helena asked. "For the theft charges? Maybe 24 hours. But if they've already left the state, it could take weeks to track them down." As we left the police station, Helena turned to me with that dangerous smile I was beginning to recognize. "They think they're smarter than us," she said. "Maybe they are. No, they're just more desperate. And desperate people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that give us exactly what we need to finish this." I was beginning to understand that Helena's desire for revenge went far beyond simple justice. She wanted to destroy Derron and Jovie completely, and she had the resources and intelligence to do it. The question was whether I was prepared to go as far as she was willing to take this. My phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Stop now, or you'll regret it." I showed the message to Helena, who read it with interest. "Threats now. They're definitely panicking. Should I be worried?" "About Jovie and Derron? No, but Brooks." "What?" "This isn't over. In fact, I think it's just getting started." As I drove home that evening, I realized that Helena was right. What had started as a simple case of adultery and embezzlement had evolved into something much more complex and dangerous. Jovie and Derron had revealed themselves to be more calculating and ruthless than I'd imagined. But they'd also made a crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the people they were trying to manipulate. That was going to cost them everything. The morning brought news that changed everything. Detective Rourke called at 6:30, waking me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. "Brooks, we've got a situation. Jovie and Derron were arrested last night at Miami International Airport." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. "Arrested for what?" "Attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with false passports and approximately $300,000 in cash." $300,000. Apparently they pooled their stolen resources. The FBI picked them up based on the warrants we issued yesterday. They're being held pending extradition. I got dressed and drove to the police station where Helena was already waiting with her lawyer. She looked satisfied in a way that suggested she'd been expecting this development. "Did you know they were planning to leave the country?" I asked. "I suspected. Derron's been researching non-extradition countries for the past month. I found the search history on his computer." "And you didn't think to mention this?" "I wanted to see how far they'd go." "Now we know." Detective Rourke emerged from his office with a thick file and the expression of a man who'd seen too much stupidity in 1 week. "They're claiming they were taking a vacation," he said. "Apparently, the false passports and cash were just coincidences." "What kind of false passports?" Helena asked. "High-quality forgeries probably cost them $20,000 each. They had new identities backstopped with credit histories and employment records." I tried to process this information. "They've been planning this for months. Longer than that. The FBI found evidence of financial planning going back almost 2 years. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a carefully orchestrated fraud." Helena's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Vance, looked up from the documents she'd been reviewing. "With this level of premeditation and the interstate nature of the crimes, we're looking at federal charges: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, identity theft. They could be facing 20 years each." "Good," Helena said simply. Over the next few hours, the scope of Jovie and Derron's planning became clear. They'd been siphoning money from multiple sources, creating false identities, and establishing offshore accounts. What I'd thought was a simple affair had actually been an elaborate long-term fraud scheme. "The question," Detective Rourke said, "is whether you want to pursue full prosecution or try to negotiate some kind of restitution agreement." I looked at Helena, who was studying the evidence with the intensity of a predator watching prey. "Full prosecution," she said, without hesitation. "Brooks?" Rourke asked. I thought about the past year of lies, the stolen money, the elaborate deception that had been my marriage. Full prosecution. That afternoon, Jovie's new lawyer called requesting a meeting. Apparently, Richard Kellerman had withdrawn from the case when the federal charges were filed, leaving Jovie with a public defender who was in over his head. We met at the federal building downtown, in a conference room that smelled like fear and desperation. Jovie's lawyer, a young man named David Chen, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "My client is prepared to make a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence," he began. "What kind of confession?" Patricia Vance asked. "Complete details of the fraud scheme, including information about other potential victims and the location of all stolen assets." "Other victims," I said. Chen consulted his notes. "Apparently, your wife and Mr. Wilder have been running similar schemes on multiple targets over the past 3 years. You're not their first victims." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "How many others?" "At least 4 other couples, possibly more. The total theft amount could be over $1 million. Helena leaned forward. "Where are they now? The other victims?" "We're still tracking them down. Some of the thefts occurred in different states, which is why the FBI is involved." Patricia Vance was taking notes rapidly. "What's your client offering in terms of restitution?" "Full disclosure of all hidden assets and cooperation with the investigation into the other victims. In exchange, she wants a plea agreement that caps her sentence at 10 years. "Absolutely not," Helena said immediately. "Mrs. Wilder," Chen said, "your husband is offering the same deal. If you refuse to negotiate, both of them could end up serving maximum sentences while providing no assistance to the other victims." I studied the young lawyer's face, looking for signs of deception. "What aren't you telling us?" Chen glanced at his notes again. "There's a possibility that your wife and Mr. Wilder aren't the masterminds behind this operation. They may have been working for someone else." "Someone else?" "The FBI thinks there might be a larger organization involved. The false passports, the offshore accounts, the level of sophistication involved. It suggests resources beyond what 2 individuals could manage alone." Helena and I exchanged glances. The possibility that Jovie and Derron were part of a larger criminal organization added a new dimension to an already complex situation. "We need time to consider this," Patricia said. "Of course, but I should mention that the FBI is offering immunity to the first person who provides information about the larger organization. If Mr. Wilder takes that deal..." "Jovie gets left holding the bag," I finished. "Essentially, yes." After the meeting, Helena and I sat in her car in the federal building parking lot, trying to process what we'd learned. "They're not just cheaters and thieves," Helena said. "They're professional criminals." How did we not see this? Because they're good at what they do. They targeted us specifically because we fit their victim profile, successful, trusting, with assets worth stealing. I thought about the past 2 years of my marriage, looking for signs I'd missed. The gradual changes in Jovie's behavior, her increasing interest in our financial situation, her new friends and activities that I'd never questioned. "What do you want to do about the plea deal?" I asked. "I want to see them both serve maximum sentences," Helena said. "But I also want the other victims to get their money back." "So we cooperate?" "We cooperate with the FBI, not with their lawyers. Let Jovie and Derron compete to see who can betray the other more completely." My phone rang. Detective Rourke's name appeared on the screen. "Brooks, you need to get down here. Jovie wants to talk to you." "About what?" She says she has information about Derron that could change everything, and she'll only give it to you. I looked at Helena, who was listening to my side of the conversation with interest. We'll be right there, I said. The Parish Heights police station had never felt more like a place where lives were destroyed. Jovie was waiting in an interview room, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine remorse in her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said. "What do you want, Jovie?" "I want to tell you the truth. All of it." I sat down across from her, with Detective Rourke and Helena flanking me. A federal agent named Sarah Martinez was recording everything. "Start talking," I said. "Derron isn't who he claims to be. His real name is Derek Walters, and he's been running fraud schemes for over 10 years. He recruited me 18 months ago, after researching our financial situation and identifying us as ideal targets." "Recruited you how?" "He approached me at a city council meeting, claimed to be interested in municipal contracts. But he already knew everything about us, our assets, our marriage problems, our personal vulnerabilities." "What marriage problems?" Jovie looked down at her hands. "The ones I created. Brooks, I started pulling away from you because Derron told me to. He said I needed to establish emotional distance to make the eventual separation easier." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. So everything, the affairs, the lies, the stealing, it was all planned? "The stealing was planned. The affair..." She paused. "The affair became real for me. I thought Derron cared about me, but he was just using me like he'd used all the others." "How many others?" 7 couples that I know of. Maybe more. Derron would research potential targets, then send someone to get close to them. Sometimes it was him, sometimes it was other people in the organization. Agent Martinez leaned forward. "What organization?" "I don't know the name. Derron called it the company, but it's not a legitimate business. They specialize in long-term fraud schemes targeting wealthy couples." "Who runs it?" "I never met them. Derron handled all the communication with the leadership, but I know they're based somewhere in the Caribbean, and they have connections to money laundering operations and document forgers." Helena spoke for the first time since we'd entered the room. "Why are you telling us this now?" "Because Derron is going to blame everything on me. He's already started, claiming I was the mastermind and he was just following my lead. But I have proof that he's lying." "What kind of proof?" Jovie looked directly at me. "Recordings. Every conversation I had with Derron about the fraud, I recorded on my phone. I was scared of him, Brooks. He told me what happened to people who crossed the organization." "What happened to them?" "They disappeared. Permanently." The room went quiet. Agent Martinez was writing rapidly, while Detective Rourke looked like he was reassessing everything he thought he knew about the case. "Where are these recordings?" Martinez asked. "Hidden in our house. Brooks, do you remember the loose floorboard in the basement near your workbench?" I nodded. "There's a waterproof container under there. The recordings are on a flash drive, along with documents Derron gave me about the other victims." Martinez and Rourke exchanged glances. "Mrs. Carven," Martinez said, "if you're willing to cooperate fully with our investigation, including testimony against Mr. Walters and this organization, we might be able to work out a plea agreement." "What kind of agreement?" "Witness protection, reduced sentence, relocation after you serve your time." Jovie looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Brooks, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that when I fell in love with Derron, I thought it was real. I thought we were building something together. But you were stealing from my company the whole time." "Yes, and I can't undo that. But I can make sure he doesn't get away with what he did to us and all the other couples." I stood up. "Jovie, I hope you do the right thing, but I can't forgive you, and I can't pretend that your cooperation changes what you did to our marriage." "I know. I just wanted you to understand that I never wanted to hurt you. Not really." As we left the police station, Helena turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Do you believe her? About the organization? Probably. About not wanting to hurt me? I don't think it matters anymore. What do you mean? I mean that regardless of her motivations, the damage is done. Our marriage is over, the trust is gone, and she's going to prison. Whether she was a willing participant or a manipulated victim doesn't change the outcome. Helena nodded. Derron's going to be furious when he finds out she's cooperating. Good. Let them destroy each other. That evening, I sat in my empty house and tried to process everything I'd learned. My wife hadn't just betrayed me. She'd been recruited by professional criminals who had targeted us specifically for our assets and vulnerability. The worst part was that it had worked. They'd stolen our money, destroyed our marriage, and nearly escaped to a country where they could have lived comfortably on their crimes. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the people they were trying to destroy. Now it was time to make sure they paid for that mistake.